She stood in Adrian Romano's office, one hand pressed protectively over the secret she'd hidden beneath her maid's uniform for 5 months. His child, conceived before she knew the charming stranger named Adrian Rossi, was actually the city's most feared crime lord. He'd never noticed her until today, until she stumbled and that single instinctive gesture revealed everything. Now his cold gray eyes locked onto hers with the precision of a predator who just discovered prey hiding in plain sight. Everything was about to change. If you love stories of hidden secrets, forbidden consequences, and powerful men brought to their knees, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far Isabella's story travels. Isabella Cruz had perfected the art of invisibility. In the 6 months she'd worked inside Adrian Romano's penthouse, she had learned to move like smoke through rooms filled with leather, crystal, and the weight of unspoken threats. She dusted shelves lined with first editions that cost more than her yearly salary. She polished windows that overlooked a city Romano controlled from 40 stories above the streets. She changed linens on a bed she tried very hard not to imagine anyone sleeping in, and she stayed invisible. It wasn't difficult. Men like Adrian Romano didn't see the help. They saw obstacles or assets, threats or tools. A maid with her eyes down and her mouth shut? She might as well have been wallpaper. Which was exactly what Isabella needed, because beneath the shapeless gray uniform she wore, beneath the careful way she held herself and moved through his space, Isabella carried a secret that grew heavier with each passing day. She was 5 months pregnant, and the baby was his. The penthouse gleamed in the late afternoon light, all glass and steel and cold perfection. Isabella worked methodically through her checklist, the same routine she followed every Tuesday and Friday. Master bedroom? Check. Guest suites? Check. Romano's private office was always last, always approached with the most caution. She'd learned early that his office was sacred territory. Papers covered the massive desk, held down by a crystal paperweight that probably cost more than her car. She wasn't supposed to touch anything on that desk. Just dust around it, empty the trash, ensure the bar cart was stocked with the expensive scotch he preferred. Isabella had never been tempted to look at those papers. She didn't want to know what kind of business Adrian Romano conducted behind closed doors. She'd heard enough whispers among the other staff, enough careful warnings. Don't ask questions, don't make eye contact, don't ever be alone with him. She'd followed those rules religiously. Until 8 months ago, before she'd taken this job, before she'd known who he really was, before one perfect night destroyed everything. Isabella pushed the memory away as she always did, focusing instead on the rhythmic motion of dusting. Her back ached. It always did now, a constant low throb that reminded her of the ticking clock she couldn't escape. She was showing, not obviously, not yet, but the uniform that had fit loosely 2 months ago now pulled slightly across her middle. She had maybe another month before someone noticed. Maybe less. The thought made her hands shake as she reached for the bookshelf, stretching to dust the top shelf where Romano kept a collection of what looked like antique maps. She'd never examined them closely. Never wanted to. Her foot caught on the edge of the oriental rug. Isabella stumbled, her center of gravity all wrong, the extra weight throwing her off balance. She gasped, reaching out instinctively, one hand grabbing for the desk, the other moving automatically to protect her stomach. "Careful!" The voice came from behind her, deep and cold as winter. Isabella's heart stopped. She spun around, her hand still pressed against her belly, and found Adrian Romano standing in the doorway of his office. He must have come in through the private entrance, the one that led directly from the elevator. She hadn't heard him, hadn't known he was even in the building. He was supposed to be at a meeting downtown. He was never here on Friday afternoons. Adrian Romano stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, and built like someone who'd learned to fight long before he'd learned to buy his way out of violence. His suit probably cost more than Isabella made in 6 months, charcoal gray and perfectly tailored. Dark hair swept back from a face that would have been handsome if it wasn't so carefully controlled, so deliberately empty of anything resembling warmth. But it was his eyes that had always unsettled her most. Gray like smoke, like steel, like winter ice. Eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. Those eyes were locked on her now, more specifically, locked on her hand, the hand still pressed protectively against her stomach. Isabella jerked her hand away, dropping it to her side, but she knew it was too late. She'd seen something flicker across his face, just for a second, just a flash of recognition that disappeared behind his usual mask. "I'm sorry, Mr. Romano," she said quickly, keeping her eyes down. "I didn't realize you were here. I'll come back later. Stay." One word. Quiet. Absolute. Isabella stayed. Adrian walked into the office, moving with the kind of controlled grace that made her think of predators. He didn't approach her, didn't come close. Instead, he moved to the bar cart, pouring 2 fingers of scotch into a crystal tumbler. The silence stretched out like a wire pulled too tight. "How long have you worked for me?" he asked finally, his back still turned. "6 months, sir." "And in those 6 months, have I ever asked you a personal question?" Isabella's mouth went dry. "No, sir." "Then I won't start now." He took a sip of scotch, still not looking at her. "But I will tell you something, Miss Cruz. I don't miss details. I notice patterns, changes, things that don't fit." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm going to ask you one question," Adrian continued, his voice so calm it was terrifying. "And I want you to understand something before you answer. I already know the truth. This is simply a test to see if you're smart enough to tell it to me." He turned then, those cold gray eyes meeting hers. "Are you pregnant?" The world seemed to tilt sideways. Isabella could lie, should lie, could claim it was someone else's, could... "Yes," she whispered. Adrian's expression didn't change. He took another sip of scotch, regarding her over the rim of the glass with the same calculating assessment she'd seen him use on business rivals in the lobby. "How far along?" 22 weeks. She watched him do the math. Watched the exact moment he arrived at the conclusion she'd been dreading for 5 months. "I see." He set the glass down with a soft click. "You're dismissed for today, Miss Cruz, but I'll need you to come in tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. We have things to discuss." It wasn't a request. Isabella fled. Atem. She didn't sleep that night. Isabella sat in her tiny studio apartment, the one she'd been so proud of when she'd first rented it, and tried to figure out what to do. Her options felt like they were narrowing to a pinpoint. Run. She could run. Take the little money she had saved and disappear before 9 o'clock tomorrow. But Adrian Romano wasn't the kind of man you ran from. He was the kind of man who found you, and she was carrying his child. Isabella pressed both hands against her belly, feeling the gentle flutter of movement that had become familiar over the past few weeks. Her daughter. The doctor had confirmed it at the last ultrasound. A girl, healthy and strong, growing despite the chaos of Isabella's circumstances. "What am I going to do?" she whispered to the empty room. The baby kicked, a gentle reminder that Isabella wasn't alone anymore. Whatever decision she made, it affected both of them now. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from an unknown number. "A car will pick you up at 8:45 a.m. Be ready. AR." Isabella stared at the message until her vision blurred. She thought about that night 8 months ago, about the man she'd met at a charity gala where she'd been working coat check. He'd introduced himself as Adrian Rossi, claimed to work in finance, had smiled at her like she was the only person in the room. He'd been charming, attentive, kind. They'd talked for hours after her shift ended, sitting in an all-night diner, sharing stories over coffee and pie. He told her about growing up poor, about fighting his way to success. She told him about her mother, about putting herself through community college, about dreams of maybe someday opening her own cleaning business. It had felt real. He'd walked her home, kissed her at her doorstep, and when she'd invited him inside, something she never did, something completely unlike her, it had felt like the most natural thing in the world. He'd been gone when she woke up, but he'd left a note. Had to catch an early flight. "You're extraordinary, Isabella. I'll find you again." He never did. 2 months later, she'd found out she was pregnant. 3 months after that, she'd taken a job at Romano Tower, desperate for better pay and benefits. She'd been cleaning the executive offices for 2 weeks before she'd walked into the penthouse and seen him. Adrian Rossi. Except his name wasn't Rossi. It was Romano. Adrian Romano, crime lord, power broker. The man whose name was whispered in fear across the entire city. The man who'd just discovered she was carrying his child. Borsfacit. The car that picked Isabella up at exactly 8:45 a.m. was a black Mercedes with windows so tinted she couldn't see inside. The driver was professional and silent, holding the door open and waiting for her to slide into the leather interior. She dressed carefully, the most professional outfit she owned, a simple black dress that was already getting tight across her middle. She'd pulled her dark hair back into a neat bun and avoided makeup, not wanting to look like she was trying too hard. The ride to Romano Tower felt both too long and not long enough. They didn't go to the main entrance. Instead, the car pulled into an underground garage past security checkpoints that required the driver to show ID twice. The elevator they took opened directly into a corridor Isabella had never seen before. Private. Secure. Far from the cleaning routes she usually followed. The driver led her to a set of double doors, knocked twice, and stepped aside. "Come in, Miss Cruz," Adrian's voice, muffled by the heavy wood. Isabella pushed through the doors and found herself in what looked like a private conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. A long table dominated the space, but Adrian wasn't sitting at it. He stood by the windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at the morning skyline. He was dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him. Dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no tie, no jacket. It made him look younger, less untouchable. It also made the faint bruises on his knuckles more visible. "Sit," he said without turning around. Isabella sat in one of the leather chairs, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. Adrian turned finally, studying her with those unreadable gray eyes. "I had you investigated," he said bluntly. "I know everything about you now, Miss Cruz, where you grew up, where you went to school, your mother's medical bills, the fact that you've been working 3 jobs for the past 4 years to pay them down." Isabella's face burned, but she kept her chin up. "I know you've never been arrested," he continued. "Never been in trouble. You don't gamble, don't use drugs, don't have debts to anyone except the hospital. You work hard, you keep your head down, and you take care of your mother." He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate. "I also know that you were working coat check at the Meridian Gala on June 15th, that you left with a man who signed into the building as Adrian Rossi, that you spent the night with him." Adrian stopped directly in front of her chair, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "What I need to know," he said quietly, "is why you didn't tell me when you realized who I was. Why you took a job in my building, worked in my home for 6 months, and never said a word." Isabella's throat felt like sandpaper. "Would you have believed me?" "I don't know. Try me now." She took a shaky breath. "When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know how to reach you. You'd given me a fake name. No number. Nothing. I tried to find Adrian Rossi in the building directory. I asked around. No one had heard of him." "So you gave up?" "I decided to keep the baby," Isabella said, and there was steel in her voice now, the first hint of the strength she'd been cultivating for 5 months. "I didn't need you to give me permission or money or anything else. I would figure it out on my own. And when you discovered who I really was?" "I was terrified." She met his eyes steadily. "I'd heard the stories. I knew what you were. And I knew that a man like you wouldn't want complications. Wouldn't want a baby with the woman who cleaned his floors." Something flickered across Adrian's face, too quick to read. "So you hid," he said. "I survived." Silence fell between them, heavy with implications. "Is it a boy or girl?" Adrian asked finally, and there was something different in his voice now, something almost careful. "A girl." "And she's healthy?" "Yes." Adrian turned away, walking back to the windows. He stood there for a long moment, his shoulders tight with tension. "I'm going to tell you what's going to happen now," he said, and his voice had returned to that cold, controlled tone. "You're going to move out of your apartment, today. A team will pack your things and relocate you to a secure location." Isabella shot to her feet. "What? No, I'm not." "You're carrying my daughter," Adrian said, turning to face her. "That makes you a target. Every enemy I have would use you to get to me if they knew you existed. You're not safe in that apartment. You're not safe anywhere except under my protection." "I don't want your protection." "You don't have a choice." The words hit like a slap. Isabella stared at him, at this man who'd been charming and kind for one perfect night, now standing before her like a marble statue, cold and unmovable and absolutely certain of his authority. "I have rights," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't just—" Miss Cruz? Adrian's voice was quiet, but it cut through her protest like a blade. I'm not your enemy. I'm not trying to punish you, but I am the father of that child, and I will not allow either of you to be vulnerable because of my enemies. He moved closer again, and Isabella hated that she had to fight the urge to step back. I'm offering you safety, he said. Security. The best medical care available. A future where you don't have to work 3 jobs to survive. I'm asking you to trust that I'm doing this for the right reasons. And if I refuse, Adrian's expression didn't change. Then I'll have you moved anyway. This isn't a negotiation, Isabella. It's a statement of fact. As of this moment, you and our daughter are under my protection. The only question is whether you walk into that protection willingly or not. Isabella felt tears burn behind her eyes, tears of frustration, fear, and the horrible realization that he was right about one thing. She'd made herself visible, and now there was no going back to hiding. Where? She asked finally, her voice barely a whisper. My home. The penthouse. As what? Your prisoner? As the mother of my child. Adrian's eyes held hers. I won't touch you. You'll have your own suite, your own space, but you'll be where I can ensure you're safe. For how long? Until she's born. After that, he paused. We'll discuss options. Options. Such a careful word for whatever trap was closing around her. Isabella thought about her apartment, about her mother in the nursing home, about the life she'd been trying so hard to build from nothing. She thought about the daughter growing inside her, innocent of all of this, deserving of safety even if it came from the most dangerous man in the city. I need to see my mother, she said. I need to tell her something. I can't just disappear. Adrian nodded. You'll have a driver, security, supervise visits. I'm not a criminal. No. But you're carrying something more valuable than any amount of money or power. His hand lifted, hovering for just a moment as if he might touch her stomach, but he stopped himself. You're carrying the only thing in this world I would kill to protect. The words should have sounded romantic. Instead, they sounded like a promise of violence. By that evening, Isabella's entire life had been packed into boxes and moved to the penthouse she'd been cleaning for 6 months. The movers had been efficient and professional, treating her belongings with more care than she'd expected. They'd set up her clothes in a massive walk-in closet attached to a suite that was 3 times the size of her entire apartment. The suite had its own bathroom with a soaking tub and a shower that looked like something from a spa. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city lights beginning to sparkle in the dusk. The bed was enormous, covered in soft gray linens that probably cost more than her security deposit. It was beautiful. It was luxurious. It was a cage. Isabella sat on the edge of that expensive bed and tried not to cry. A knock at the door made her look up. Come in, she called, expecting one of the staff members she'd worked alongside for months, wondering how she'd explain this impossible situation. Adrian stepped through the door instead. He'd changed into dark jeans and a black sweater, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. But his eyes were still that same cold gray, still watching her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. I thought you might be hungry, he said, gesturing toward the door. Dinner's ready if you want to join me. It wasn't really a question. Isabella followed him through the penthouse to the formal dining room she'd dusted 100 times. The table that could easily seat 20 had been set for 2, with candles and wine glasses and plates that probably cost more than her car. I don't drink, she said automatically. I know, it's sparkling water. Adrian pulled out a chair for her, the gesture so incongruous with everything else about this situation that Isabella almost laughed. She sat instead. The food was incredible, some kind of chicken in a cream sauce, roasted vegetables, bread that smelled like heaven. Isabella hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite hit her tongue. Adrian ate in silence, giving her space, not pushing for conversation. It was Isabella who finally broke the quiet. Why did you use a fake name that night? He looked up from his plate, considering her. I use that name sometimes when I want to move through the world without being Adrian Romano, without the weight of expectation and fear. So you lied? Yes. At least he was honest about it. Would you have come home with me if I'd told you the truth? Adrian asked. Isabella thought about it. No. That's why I lied. That's not an excuse. No, he agreed. It's not. but it's the truth. She took another bite, needing something to do with her hands. What happens now? You keep me here until the baby's born, and then what? You take her and send me away? Is that what you think I want? I don't know what you want. I don't know you. Adrian set down his fork, his expression carefully neutral. Then ask. Whatever you want to know. I'll answer honestly. It was an opening, a genuine one from what she could tell. Isabella thought about all the questions that had been burning in her mind for 8 months. Why did you come back to that gala coat check 3 times that night before you finally talked to me? Surprise flickered across Adrian's face. He clearly hadn't expected that question. Because you were the first person in a very long time who looked at me like I was just a man, he said quietly. Not a name, not a reputation, just someone you might want to talk to. Was any of it real? The diner? The stories? All of it. His eyes held hers. That night was the most honest I've been with anyone in years. Everything I told you was true except my name. Isabella wanted to believe him. Part of her, the part that still remembered how his hand had felt in hers, desperately wanted to believe him. But the rest of her knew better. You said you'd find me again, she said. In the note, you said you'd find me. I tried. Adrian's jaw tightened. I went back to that building 2 weeks later. You'd moved out. The landlord wouldn't give me information. I had people search, but you'd covered your tracks well. I was hiding from an ex, Isabella admitted. I didn't want him to find me, so I made sure I was hard to track. You did a good job. It took me 4 months to give up looking. The admission hung between them. And now? Isabella asked. Now that you've found me, or I've found you, what do you actually want? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming once against the tablecloth. I want my daughter to know her father, he said finally. I want her to be safe. I want her to have every opportunity in the world. He paused. And I want to know if there's any chance that the woman I met that night is still somewhere inside the person sitting across from me, looking at me like I'm a monster. You are a monster, Isabella said, but there was no heat in it, just exhaustion. Everyone says so. Yes, Adrian agreed. I am, but I'm trying very hard not to be one to you. It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd said all day. Isabella finished her dinner in silence, processing everything, trying to figure out what her life looked like now, trying to imagine raising a daughter in this world of crystal and steel and carefully controlled violence, trying to remember if the man across from her had ever really existed, or if Adrian Rossi had just been a beautiful lie. I want to see my mother tomorrow, she said as she stood to leave. I'll arrange it. And I want my own space, my own life. I'm not going to be locked in this tower. Within reason. No, not within reason. I'm not your prisoner, and I won't live like one. Adrian stood as well, moving around the table until he was close enough that she could smell his cologne. The same scent he'd worn that night, the one that had haunted her dreams for months. You're not my prisoner, he said quietly, but you are under my protection. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. A prisoner has no choice. I'm giving you choices, Isabella, just not the choice to put yourself in danger. She wanted to argue, wanted to push back against the absolute certainty in his voice, but she was tired. So tired. And the baby was kicking again, reminding her that this wasn't just about her anymore. I'm going to bed, she said. Adrian nodded, stepping back to give her space. If you need anything, there's a phone in your room. Extension 7 reaches me directly. I won't need it. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Isabella. She looked back. That night, he said, and something in his expression had shifted, become less controlled, more human. I meant what I said in the note. You were extraordinary. You are extraordinary. And I know you don't trust me, but I'm going to prove to you that you can. Isabella didn't respond. She just walked away back to her beautiful cage and tried not to think about how much she wanted to believe him. The next morning, Isabella woke to find a doctor waiting in the sitting room of her suite. Dr. Sarah Chen was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that immediately put Isabella at ease. She'd brought a portable ultrasound machine in a medical bag that looked like it could handle anything short of surgery. Mr. Romano wanted me to check on you and the baby, Dr. Chen explained. Make sure everything's progressing normally after yesterday's stress. Isabella wanted to refuse, wanted to assert some kind of control over this situation. But the truth was, she was worried. The cramping she'd felt last night, the way her back had ached more than usual, it had scared her. So she let Dr. Chen examine her. "Everything looks good," the doctor said 20 minutes later, pointing to the ultrasound screen where Isabella's daughter moved and kicked, blissfully unaware of the complicated world waiting for her. "Strong heartbeat, good movement. You're measuring right on track for 22 weeks. "When's your due date?" Dr. Chen asked. "June 12th. "Perfect. That gives us plenty of time to prepare." The doctor made notes in her tablet. "I'd like to see you weekly until delivery. More often if you have any concerns." "I can't afford—" "Mr. Romano is covering all medical expenses," Dr. Chen said gently. "And before you argue, let me tell you something. I've been a doctor for 30 years. I've seen a lot of powerful men in that time. Most of them only care about children when it benefits them somehow." She looked Isabella directly in the eyes. "Adrian Romano called me himself at 6 this morning. He wanted to know everything about prenatal care, about what you'd need, about potential complications. He asked intelligent questions. He listened, and he made it very clear that your well-being and the baby's well-being were his only priorities." Dr. Chen packed up her equipment. "I'm not saying trust him blindly, but I am saying that man is genuinely invested in making sure you're both safe and healthy. That's worth something." After she left, Isabella stood by the window, looking out at the city stretching endlessly in all directions. She thought about Adrian calling a doctor at 6 in the morning, about him asking questions, trying to understand, about the way he'd said, "our daughter," like the words meant something. Her phone buzzed. A text from the same unknown number as before. "Your mother's care has been transferred to St. Catherine's Premium Care Facility. She was moved this morning. All expenses covered. You can visit anytime. Driver is available whenever you're ready. AR." Isabella's hands shook as she read the message. St. Catherine's was the best nursing home in the city. The place she'd dreamed of being able to afford someday, maybe, if she worked hard enough and saved long enough. It was also $20,000 a month. She should be angry. He'd made another decision about her life without asking, moved her mother without permission. But all she could think about was her mother in a clean room with actual nurses instead of overworked aides. Her mother getting the kind of care she deserved instead of the bare minimum their insurance would cover. Her daughter's grandfather making sure his grandchild's grandmother was taken care of. Isabella pressed her forehead against the cool glass and let herself cry. For everything she'd lost, for everything that was changing, for the impossible situation she'd found herself in. And maybe, just a little, for the fact that part of her wanted to believe that Adrian Romano could be more than the monster everyone said he was. That the man who'd held her hand in a diner and told her she was extraordinary might still exist somewhere beneath the cold exterior. That maybe, just maybe, they could figure out how to do this together. The baby kicked hard, as if agreeing. Isabella wiped her eyes and picked up her phone. "Thank you. I'd like to see her this afternoon." "I see." The response came immediately. "Car will be ready at 2 p.m. I'd like to come with you, if you'll allow it. She should know who I am." AR Isabella stared at the message for a long time. This was it. The moment where she either kept fighting against the inevitable or started trying to find a way forward. She thought about her daughter, about the kind of father she wanted her to have, about the fact that, monster or not, Adrian Romano was trying. Okay, 2 p.m. I see. She hit send before she could change her mind. And somewhere in this tower of glass and steel and secrets, Isabella suspected that Adrian Romano was reading that single word and understanding exactly what it meant. Not forgiveness, not trust, but maybe, possibly, the beginning of something that could become both. The car that arrived at exactly 2 o'clock was different from the one that had brought Isabella to the tower. This one was larger, an SUV with bulletproof glass and what looked like reinforced panels. 2 additional vehicles flanked it. Security, she realized, though the men inside wore suits instead of uniforms. Adrian was already waiting in the lobby when Isabella stepped out of the private elevator. He'd changed into a navy suit that made his eyes look even more gray, more intense. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression, a softening she was beginning to recognize, though she didn't quite trust it yet. "Ready?" he asked. Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice. She'd been rehearsing what to tell her mother for the past 2 hours and still had no idea how to explain any of this. The drive to St. Catharines took 20 minutes through midday traffic. Adrian sat beside her in silence, occasionally glancing at his phone, but mostly just watching the city pass by the tinted windows. Isabella noticed the way his jaw tightened every time they slowed down, the way his hand drifted toward his jacket as if checking for something. She wondered what it was like to live with that kind of constant vigilance, always expecting threats. "Does it ever stop?" she asked quietly. Adrian looked at her. "Does what stop?" "Being afraid someone's going to attack, looking for danger everywhere." He considered the question seriously. "No, but you learn to live with it. You learn to prepare for the worst and hope for the best." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." His eyes held hers. "Which is why I want better for our daughter. I want her to feel safe, to not have to look over her shoulder every time she leaves the house." "Then why bring her into your world at all? Why not just let me raise her somewhere else, somewhere normal?" The words hung between them like a challenge. Adrian's expression hardened slightly. "Because she's my daughter. Because I won't abandon her, no matter how much safer it might be. And because normal doesn't exist anymore. Not for you, not since the moment I realized who you were." Isabella wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. The moment Adrian Romano discovered he had a child, everything changed. There was no going back to invisible, no matter how much she might want to. St. Catharines rose before them like a palace disguised as a medical facility. Manicured gardens surrounded the building, and the entrance looked more like a luxury hotel than a nursing home. Isabella had visited the website once, years ago, when her mother's condition first worsened. She'd seen the monthly rates and closed the browser, accepting that some dreams were impossible. The staff greeted Adrian by name. That shocked her more than anything else that day. The receptionist smiled warmly, genuinely, as if she actually liked him. The head nurse who escorted them to the third floor chatted easily about the facility's new physical therapy equipment, and Adrian asked intelligent questions about how it might help with stroke recovery. "Your mother's in room 312, the nurse said. "We've got her settled in nicely. She seems comfortable." Isabella's heart pounded as they approached the room. She hadn't told her mother about the pregnancy yet, had been putting it off week after week, terrified of the disappointment she might see in those tired eyes. Now she was about to introduce her to the father of her grandchild, a man whose name was synonymous with violence and power. "Wait," Isabella said, stopping outside the door. She turned to Adrian. "Let me talk to her first. Alone, please." He nodded without argument. "I'll be right here." Isabella pushed through the door and found her mother sitting in a chair by the window, sunlight streaming across her face. Maria Cruz was only 58, but the stroke had aged her, left one side of her face slightly slack, her left arm weak and trembling. But her eyes were still sharp, still full of the fierce love that had carried Isabella through childhood. "Mija," Maria said, her speech slightly slurred but understandable. "What is this place? They said you arranged it, but how could you possibly afford—" "Mama!" Isabella crossed the room and knelt beside the chair, taking her mother's good hand. "I need to tell you something. Several things, actually, and I need you to listen before you get upset." Maria's eyes narrowed. "You're in trouble." "Not trouble exactly. It's complicated." Isabella took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The words fell like stones into water. Maria's hand tightened on hers. "How far along?" "Almost 6 months." 6 months? Isabella Maria Cruz, you've been hiding this from me for 6 months? I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know what to do. The father, he wasn't part of the picture. Or I thought he wasn't. Isabella stood, pacing to the window and back. I met him at a charity gala one night. He told me his name was Adrian Rossi, said he worked in finance, and then he disappeared. By the time I found out I was pregnant, I had no way to reach him. And now? Maria's voice was sharp despite the slur. Now he's back. He found out about the baby. And Mama, he's the one who moved you here. He's paying for everything, your care, the doctors, all of it. Maria's eyes went wide. This Adrian, he must be very wealthy to afford St. Catharines. He is. Isabella returned to her mother's side. He's also complicated, powerful, and he wants to be part of our daughter's life. Our daughter? Maria repeated softly. A girl? Isabella smiled despite her nerves. Yes, a girl. And this man, this Adrian, is he good to you? Does he treat you with respect? How did she answer that? Adrian had upended her entire life in less than 24 hours. He'd moved her without permission, made decisions about her future without asking. But he'd also made sure she was safe, that their daughter was cared for, that Maria had the best possible care. He's trying, Isabella said finally. I think he's trying to do the right thing. He's just not used to asking permission instead of giving orders. Maria studied her daughter's face with the keen perception that comes from decades of reading between lines. You like him? I don't even know him. That's not what I asked. Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks. I liked who I thought he was. The man I met that night, he was kind and funny and genuinely interested in what I had to say. But I don't know if that person was real or just a mask. Only one way to find out, Maria said. Bring him in. Let me meet the father of my granddaughter. Mama, there's something else you should know. His real name isn't Rossi. It's Romano. Adrian Romano. The color drained from Maria's face. Even sheltered in nursing homes and hospitals for the past 3 years, even with her world narrowed to the size of whatever room she occupied, Maria Cruz had heard that name. Everyone had. The Romano family, she whispered. Isabella, what have you gotten yourself into? I didn't know. I swear I didn't know until it was too late. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out how to raise a daughter with a man who controls half the city through fear and money. Isabella's voice cracked. I'm terrified, Mama. I'm so scared I'm going to mess this up and hurt her before she's even born. Maria reached out with her trembling hand and cupped Isabella's face. You listen to me. You are strong. You are smart. And you are a good person. That little girl is lucky to have you as her mother, no matter who her father is. Tears slid down Isabella's cheeks. What if that's not enough? It will be. Because you'll fight for her. You'll protect her. Even from her own father if you have to. Isabella closed her eyes, letting her mother's words sink in. When she opened them again, she felt steadier. Still scared, but steadier. Do you want to meet him? Maria nodded. I want to look this Adrian Romano in the eyes and decide for myself what kind of man he is. Isabella went to the door and found Adrian exactly where he'd said he'd be, leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets, looking less like a crime lord and more like a nervous man waiting to meet his child's grandmother. She wants to meet you, Chet, Isabella said. Adrian straightened immediately. Did you tell her who I am? Everything. Something flickered across his face, respect maybe, or relief that he wouldn't have to pretend. They walked into the room together and Isabella watched as Adrian Romano, the man who made business rivals disappear, who controlled more money and power than most people could imagine, approached her mother with genuine deference. Mrs. Cruz, he said, extending his hand. I'm Adrian. It's an honor to meet you. Maria studied that offered hand for a long moment before taking it with her good right hand. Mr. Romano, my daughter tells me you're responsible for this room. I am. I wanted to make sure you had the best possible care. Why? The blunt question seemed to catch Adrian off guard. Because you're Isabella's mother. Because you'll be my daughter's grandmother. Because you deserve it. I deserve nothing from you, Maria said sharply. I've lived my whole life without Romano money, and I would have continued to do so if Isabella hadn't gotten involved with your family. Adrian didn't flinch. You're right, you don't need my money. But Isabella does. Your granddaughter does, and I'm trying to take care of them the only way I know how. By throwing money at problems? Sometimes money solves problems. Sometimes it creates new ones. Adrian pulled a chair close to Maria's and sat, bringing himself to her eye level. I'm not going to pretend I'm a good man, Mrs. Cruz. I'm not going to lie about what I am or what I do. But I'm going to promise you that I will protect your daughter and your granddaughter with everything I have. Maria's eyes narrowed. Protection. That's an interesting word. Are you protecting them or keeping them? The question landed like a punch. Adrian's jaw tightened. Both, if I'm being honest. They're safer with me than anywhere else. But I'm also not ready to let either of them go. At least you're honest about being a controlling bastard, Maria said. And despite everything, there was almost approval in her tone. Adrian's lips quirked, not quite a smile, but close. My own mother said the same thing, frequently. Your mother sounds like a smart woman. She was. She died when I was 17. I'm sorry. Maria's expression softened slightly. That's too young to lose your mother. Yes. Adrian's voice was quiet. Which is why I want my daughter to have both her parents. Why I want her to know her grandmother. Family matters, Mrs. Cruz. Even to people like me. Isabella watched the exchange in stunned silence. This was not the conversation she'd expected. She'd anticipated her mother's anger, Adrian's cold efficiency, maybe an argument about control and rights and futures. Instead, they were talking like two people trying to understand each other. Isabella says you attended her ultrasound appointments, Maria said. Adrian glanced at Isabella in surprise. I asked Dr. Chen to send me the reports. I wanted to know how the pregnancy was progressing, and you called her at 6 in the morning to ask questions about prenatal care. I did. Why? The question seemed simple, but Isabella could see it went deeper. Her mother was trying to figure out what motivated this man, what drove him beyond power and control. Adrian was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming once against his knee, a tell Isabella was beginning to recognize, a sign he was choosing his words carefully. Because I failed once, he said finally. My wife was pregnant 3 years ago. I was so focused on business, on maintaining control, on proving myself that I missed things. Warning signs. I didn't attend appointments, didn't ask questions. And when complications developed, he stopped, his throat working. She lost the baby at 7 months, and I lost both of them 3 days later from complications. The room fell silent. Isabella felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Adrian had been married, had lost a child, had lost everything while she'd been living her quiet life, completely unaware that the stranger she'd met at a gala had been carrying that kind of grief. I'm sorry, Maria said softly, and this time there was no sharpness in her voice. That's a terrible loss. It was my fault. I wasn't there. I didn't know what to look for. I thought money and doctors and the best hospital were enough. Adrian looked up, meeting Maria's eyes. I won't make that mistake again. I'm not leaving anything to chance this time. I'm asking the questions, attending the appointments, learning everything I can. And what happens when the baby's born? Maria asked. When Isabella wants to make decisions you don't agree with? When she wants a life outside your control? Then we'll figure it out together, or we'll fight about it, or we'll compromise. Adrian's gaze shifted to Isabella. But we'll do it as partners, not as enemies. Partners? Isabella repeated. Is that what we are? That's what I'm hoping we can become. The words hung in the air, weighted with possibility and risk. Maria watched them both for a long moment, her sharp eyes moving between her daughter and the father of her grandchild. Mr. Romano, she said finally, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen very carefully. Adrian nodded. My daughter is the best thing I ever created. She's kind and strong and good, better than I ever was. Better than this world deserves. She's been taking care of me for years, working herself to exhaustion to make sure I had what I needed. Maria's trembling hand tightened on the arm of her chair. If you hurt her, if you use your power to control her, or diminish her, or make her feel less than she is, I will find a way to make you regret it. I don't care how much money you have or how many people fear you. I will haunt you from whatever comes after this life until you understand what you've destroyed. It should have sounded absurd. A stroke victim in a wheelchair threatening one of the most powerful men in the city. Instead, it sounded like absolute truth. Adrian held Maria's gaze steadily. I believe you would, and I respect that. He stood, straightening his suit. I'll give you time alone with your daughter. But, Mrs. Cruz, I want you to know something too. He moved to the door, then paused. I've done terrible things. I've hurt people, destroyed lives, made choices I can't take back. But that night I met Isabella, before I knew she worked for me, before any of this. She made me remember what it felt like to be just Adrian, not Romano, not the heir to an empire built on fear, just a man talking to an extraordinary woman. His eyes found Isabella's. I can't promise I'll always make the right choice. I can't promise I won't be controlling or difficult or too used to getting my own way, but I can promise that I will try every single day to be the kind of man who deserves both of you. He left before either of them could respond. Isabella and her mother sat in silence for several heartbeats. Well, Maria said finally, he's either the best liar I've ever met, or he's actually falling in love with you. He's not. We barely know each other. It's just about the baby. Mija, I may be old and broken, but I'm not blind. That man looked at you like you were the only thing keeping him human. Maria reached for Isabella's hand. The question is, how do you look at him? Isabella thought about Adrian calling a doctor at dawn, about him sitting in a hospital corridor waiting to meet her mother, about the grief in his voice when he talked about losing his wife and child, about the way her heart had stuttered when he'd said she was extraordinary. I don't know, she'd whispered. I'm so scared of making another mistake, of trusting the wrong person, of putting my daughter in danger because I wanted to believe in something that wasn't real. Then don't trust him yet, Maria said practically. Watch him. Learn who he really is. Give yourself time to see if the man you met that night actually exists underneath all the power and control. And if he doesn't, then you fight for your daughter and yourself. But Isabella, if he does exist, if that grief is real, if that desire to be better is genuine, maybe you owe it to your daughter to give him a chance to prove it. Isabella stayed with her mother for another hour, talking about safer things. The baby's movements, potential names, the nursery that was apparently being designed in the penthouse even though Isabella hadn't agreed to any of it. When she finally emerged, she found Adrian in a sitting area down the hall, talking quietly with an older man in a doctor's coat. They shook hands, and the doctor walked away looking thoughtful. Making friends? Isabella asked. Adrian turned. Ensuring your mother gets the best neurologist in the country. Dr. Harrison specializes in stroke recovery. He thinks there might be some new therapies that could improve her mobility. Of course he did. Of course, Adrian Romano couldn't just leave well enough alone, couldn't just accept that some things were out of his control. You can't fix everything, Isabella said. No, but I can try. They walked to the elevator in silence. Once inside, with the doors closed and privacy assured, Adrian spoke again. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about my wife, about losing them. Isabella turned to face him. When did it happen? 3 years ago last month. Her name was Catherine. She was pregnant with our son when she died. I'm sorry. I can't imagine losing someone like that. I hope you never have to. Adrian's hand drifted unconsciously to his chest, as if feeling for something that wasn't there anymore. For a long time after, I didn't care about anything. I took risks I shouldn't have survived, made enemies deliberately. I think part of me wanted someone to finally manage what I couldn't do myself. The elevator descended smoothly, counting down floors. What changed? Isabella asked. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. I found out I was going to be a father again, and I realized I'd been given a second chance to not fail completely. The words hit Isabella square in the chest. Is that all this is to you? She asked quietly. A second chance? A way to redeem yourself for what happened before? No. Adrian moved closer, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his presence like heat. At first, maybe. That first moment when I realized the baby was mine, when I did the math. Yes, I thought about Catherine, about how I'd failed her. He paused, seeming to struggle for words. But then I remembered that night with you, how you'd laughed at my terrible jokes, how you'd argued with me about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie, how you'd looked at me like I was worth knowing. His eyes held hers. This isn't about redemption, Isabella. This is about trying to build something real with someone who saw me, really saw me, before she knew what I was worth or what I was capable of. Isabella wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to live in your world, how to be whatever you need me to be. Then don't be what I need. Be exactly who you are. That's all I'm asking. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor. The security team was waiting, subtle but present. The armored SUV idled at the curb. The real world rushed back in with all its complications. But for just a moment, in that elevator, Isabella let herself imagine what it might be like if Adrian was telling the truth. If the man from the diner really did exist beneath the armor of Adrian Romano. If maybe, somehow, they could figure out how to be partners instead of opponents. The drive back to this tower was quiet, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Isabella found herself acutely aware of Adrian beside her, of the way he occasionally glanced at her as if checking that she was okay, of the controlled strength in his hands as he typed messages on his phone. "What are you working on?" she asked. Adrian looked up, surprised she'd asked. "Arranging a meeting with my attorney. I want to set up a trust for our daughter, something that can't be touched by my business dealings, or any legal issues that might arise." "You're expecting legal issues?" "I always expect problems. That way I'm not surprised when they arrive." "That's a depressing way to live." "Yes," he agreed. "It is." Isabella thought about what her mother had said, about watching him, learning who he really was. "Tell me something," she said. "Something true. Not about business or security or any of this. Just something about you." Adrian considered the request seriously. "I hate salmon." Isabella blinked. "What?" "Salmon. Everyone says it's healthy, that you should eat it twice a week. I can't stand it, but I keep ordering it at business dinners because it seems like the appropriate choice." Despite everything, Isabella laughed. "That's ridiculous." "I know." And there, just for a second, was a genuine smile. "What about you? Tell me something I don't know." "I'm terrible at singing, absolutely awful, but I sing to the baby anyway when I'm alone." "What do you sing?" "Old songs my mother used to sing to me, lullabies in Spanish." "Will you teach them to me?" Adrian asked quietly, "so I can sing them too?" The question was so unexpected, so genuinely hopeful, that Isabella felt something crack in her chest. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'll teach you." They arrived at the tower as the sun was beginning to set, painting the glass exterior in shades of gold and amber. Adrian walked with her to the private elevator, his hand hovering near the small of her back without quite touching. "Thank you for letting me meet your mother," he said as the elevator doors opened. "Thank you for being respectful, and for what you said to her about trying to be better." "I meant it." "I know." Isabella stepped into the elevator, then paused. "Adrian?" He looked up. "Die Hard is absolutely a Christmas movie, and I will die on that hill." For the first time since she'd learned his real name, Adrian Romano laughed, a genuine surprise sound that transformed his entire face, made him look younger, lighter, almost carefree. "Noted," he said, still smiling as the elevator doors closed. Isabella rode up to the penthouse feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, not yet trust, but maybe, possibly, the beginning of both. The penthouse felt different when Isabella returned that evening. Less like a cage, more like a space she was beginning to occupy rather than just exist within. She found herself noticing details she'd ignored when she was just the maid, the way the evening light caught the crystal decanters in the bar, the subtle scent of leather and cedar that seemed to permeate everything, the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in the library filled with volumes that actually looked read rather than decorative. She was examining a collection of what appeared to be first-edition Hemingways when Adrian found her. "You read Hemingway?" she asked without turning around. "When I have time, which isn't often anymore." He moved into the room, and she heard the soft clink of ice in a glass. "Can I get you anything? Water? Juice?" "Water would be good." He returned a moment later with sparkling water in a crystal glass, the kind she used to polish. Isabella accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. She told herself the flutter in her stomach was the baby moving, nothing more. "I wasn't sure you'd actually read them," she said, gesturing to the books. "Rich people sometimes collect things just to have them." "I'm not most rich people." Adrian pulled a slim volume from the shelf. "My mother gave me this when I was 16. The Old Man and the Sea. She said if I was going to inherit an empire, I needed to understand that sometimes you fight battles you can't win, and that doesn't make the fight meaningless." Isabella took the book he offered. The binding was worn, the pages soft with repeated reading. Inside the front cover, in elegant script, someone had written, "For my son, who will always choose the hard right over the easy wrong. Love, Mama." "She sounds like she was remarkable," Isabella said softly. "She was the only person who ever told me no and meant it." Adrian's smile was sad. "She died of cancer 6 months after my father was killed. The doctors said it was aggressive, that there was nothing they could have done, but I think she just didn't want to live in a world where he wasn't anymore." Isabella handed the book back carefully. How did your father die? Violently, the way most men in our business die. Adrian returned the book to its place on the shelf. He made an enemy of the wrong person, and they made an example of him. I was 17. Overnight, I went from being the heir who'd eventually take over to being the head of a family that was bleeding territory and loyalty. That's too much responsibility for anyone that young. Yes, but I didn't have the luxury of being young anymore. Adrian moved to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to sparkle in the twilight. I had to prove I was strong enough, ruthless enough, smart enough. I had to make people fear me more than they'd feared my father. Did you succeed? Obviously. The word was flat, empty of pride. But the cost was higher than I expected. Isabella wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his posture warned her not to push. Instead, she moved to stand beside him at the window, looking out at the empire he controlled. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. The choices you made? Adrian was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Every single day, but regret doesn't change anything. It just makes you weak if you let it. Or it makes you human. He turned to look at her then, something raw and unguarded in his expression. Is that what you want? For me to be human? I want you to be real, Isabella said. I want to know who you actually are underneath all the armor and control. What if you don't like what you find? Then at least I'll know the truth. The moment stretched between them, weighted with possibility and risk. Adrian's hand lifted, hovering near her face as if he wanted to touch her but wasn't sure he had the right. Isabella's breath caught, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. The sharp buzz of his phone shattered the moment. Adrian stepped back, his expression shuddering as he pulled the phone from his pocket. Whatever he saw on the screen made his jaw tighten. I have to take this, he said. It's important. He was already walking away, his voice dropping to the cold, controlled tone she was beginning to recognize as his business voice. Isabella stood alone by the window, trying to calm her racing pulse, trying not to feel disappointed that they'd been interrupted, trying not to wonder what might have happened if they hadn't been. She wandered back to her suite, suddenly exhausted. The baby was active tonight, rolling and kicking as if protesting the day's stress. Isabella changed into comfortable clothes and settled into bed with a book, but she couldn't focus on the words. She kept thinking about Adrian's mother writing that inscription, about him losing both parents before he was 18, about the weight of inheriting an empire built on violence and fear, about the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious he was afraid to break. Sleep came eventually, restless and dream-filled. She woke at 2 a.m. to sounds she couldn't quite identify, raised voices, movement, the distant slam of a door. Isabella sat up, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach as adrenaline spiked through her system. She should stay in her room, lock the door, wait for whatever was happening to pass. Instead, she found herself pulling on a robe and padding barefoot into the hallway. The penthouse was dark except for the light spilling from Adrian's office. As Isabella approached, the voices became clearer. Adrian's low and deadly calm, another man's higher, strained with what sounded like fear. I don't care what Castellano promised you, Adrian was saying. You work for me. That means you don't make side deals, you don't cut corners, and you sure as hell don't steal from my operations. It wasn't stealing, the other man protested. It was just a percentage, a finder's fee. You took money that wasn't yours. You betrayed my trust. That has consequences. Isabella stopped just outside the door, her heart pounding. She shouldn't be listening to this. This was exactly the kind of business she didn't want to know about. But she couldn't make herself walk away. Please, Mr. Romano, I have a family, kids. I made a mistake, but I can fix it. You should have thought about your family before you decided to steal from me. Adrian's voice was colder than Isabella had ever heard it. Marcus will escort you out. You have 48 hours to leave the city. If I see you again after that, if I even hear your name mentioned, there will be consequences. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I swear I'll get him out of my sight. Footsteps approached the door. Isabella barely had time to step back into the shadows before a large man in a dark suit emerged, gripping the arm of a smaller, balding man who looked like he might be sick. They headed toward the private elevator without seeing her. Isabella waited until they were gone before moving to the office doorway. Adrian stood behind his desk, both hands braced on the surface, his head bowed. Even from across the room, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid control he was exerting over himself. "You're awake," he said without looking up. "The noise woke me. Is everything okay?" "Define okay." Adrian finally raised his head, and the exhaustion in his face shocked her. "An employee decided to embezzle from one of my legitimate businesses. I just fired him and gave him 48 hours to disappear before I let the people he stole from know where to find him." Isabella stepped into the office. "That sounded like mercy." "It was. 5 years ago, I would have killed him myself." Adrian moved around the desk, loosening his tie with sharp, frustrated movements. "Now I give him a chance to run, to start over somewhere else, to maybe be smarter next time. Because you're trying to be better." "Because I'm tired," he corrected. "I'm tired of the violence, tired of cleaning up blood, tired of looking at people and seeing only threats or assets instead of human beings." He sank into the leather chair by the window, his head falling back against the cushion. In the dim light, he looked younger, more vulnerable than Isabella had ever seen him. "Why do you keep doing it then?" she asked. "If you're so tired of it, why not just walk away?" Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Walk away to what?" "This is all I know, all I've ever known. The Romano family has been in this business for 3 generations. My grandfather built the foundation, my father expanded the empire, and I inherited the consequences." Isabella crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite his. "That doesn't mean you have to keep it going. You could sell everything, start over, be someone else." "Like Adrian Rossi?" His smile was bitter. "That man doesn't exist, Isabella. He was a fantasy, a single night of pretending I could be normal." He seemed pretty real to me." Adrian turned his head to look at her. "That night with you was the most honest I'd been in years, but it was still a lie. I can't escape what I am, what my name means." "Then change what it means." The words hung in the air between them. Adrian sat forward, his elbows on his knees, studying her intently. "You really believe that's possible?" "I believe people can change if they want to badly enough. I believe you're already changing. You just don't see it yet." "What makes you so certain?" "Because the man who just gave that employee 48 hours to run instead of killing him isn't the same man everyone fears. Because the man who held my hand while I met with my mother, who researches prenatal care at 6 in the morning, who wants to learn Spanish lullabies for our daughter, that man is real too." Isabella leaned forward, her voice fierce. "You're not just one thing, Adrian. You're not just the crime lord or just the man from the diner. You're both. And maybe a dozen other versions I haven't met yet. But you get to choose which version you want to become." Adrian stared at her like she'd said something profound, or possibly insane. Then, slowly he reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, grounding. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "That's not your choice to make. It's mine." "And what do you choose?" The question felt loaded, dangerous. Isabella knew her answer mattered, knew it would shape whatever came next. "I choose to give you a chance," she said, "to see if the man I met that night can coexist with the man you've become, to find out if we can build something real instead of just circling each other in fear." Adrian's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. "I'll try not to disappoint you." "You'll probably disappoint me sometimes. I'll probably disappoint you too. That's what people do. And then what? Then we figure it out, together." The words seemed to settle something between them. Adrian released her hand slowly, as if reluctant to break the connection, and stood. "It's late. You should get some rest." Isabella rose as well, but she didn't immediately leave. "Adrian, that employee you just let go, what happens if he doesn't leave the city?" Adrian's expression hardened slightly. "Then the people he stole from will find him, and I won't intervene. That's still violence, still blood on your hands. Yes, but it's his choice now, not mine. I gave him an out. What he does with it is up to him." Isabella nodded slowly, understanding what he wasn't saying, that this was the best he could do right now, that mercy in his world looked different than in hers, that change would be gradual, incremental, possibly incomplete. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Isabella. She made it halfway down the hall before his voice stopped her. Isabella. She turned back. Thank you for not looking at me like I'm a monster. You're welcome. Thank you for not treating me like I'm invisible. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding, an acknowledgement that they were both trying to see each other clearly despite the complications and fears. Isabella returned to her suite and climbed back into bed, the baby settling into a quieter rhythm as if sensing her mother's calmer state. She lay awake for a long time, thinking about choices and change, about the man who'd fired an employee instead of killing him, about the possibility that maybe people could become better versions of themselves if they wanted it badly enough. The next morning, Isabella woke to find a note slipped under her door. Adrian's handwriting was precise, controlled, each letter formed with the same careful attention he seemed to apply to everything. Had to leave early for a meeting. Dr. Chen will be here at 10 a.m. for your weekly checkup. Marcus will drive you to visit your mother this afternoon if you'd like. There's breakfast waiting in the kitchen. The chef made churros because I remembered you mentioned they were your favorite. I hope today is a good day. Isabella held the note for a long moment, something warm and dangerous blooming in her chest. He'd remembered. From one offhand comment months ago in a diner, he'd remembered that she loved churros. She found the kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and sugar. The chef, a woman in her 50s named Rosa, who'd always been kind during Isabella's cleaning shifts, smiled when she entered. Good morning, Miss Cruz. Mr. Romano called this morning with very specific instructions about the churros. I hope they're as good as you remember. They were better. Isabella sat at the kitchen island, eating fresh churros with chocolate sauce for dipping, and tried not to think about how easily she could get used to this. How dangerous it was to let herself believe that maybe Adrian really was trying to be someone worthy of trust. Dr. Chen arrived precisely at 10, efficient and thorough as always. The baby was measuring perfectly, heartbeat strong, all indicators positive. Isabella lay on the examination table, watching her daughter move on the ultrasound screen, and felt overwhelmed by love and terror in equal measure. Everything looks excellent, Dr. Chen said, making notes. You're at 23 weeks now. Have you thought about birthing plans? Hospital preferences? I haven't really had time to think about it. Dr. Chen gave her a knowing look. Mr. Romano has already arranged for a suite at Mercy General. It's the best maternity unit in the city, but if you'd prefer somewhere else, we can make arrangements. Of course he had. Of course Adrian had already planned everything without asking her. Isabella should be angry, should resent the continued assumption that he could make decisions about her life without consultation. Instead, she just felt tired. Mercy General is fine, she said. After Doctor Chen left, Isabella spent an hour in the penthouse library trying to read but unable to focus. Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. How did the appointment go? Good. Baby's healthy. And you? Isabella stared at the question. Such a simple thing, asking about her instead of just the pregnancy. But it felt significant somehow, like he was trying to remember that she was a person beyond being the mother of his child. I'm okay. The churros were perfect. Thank you. Good. I'll be home by 6. I thought maybe we could have dinner together. If you want. There was something almost hesitant in the message, as if he was genuinely offering a choice rather than issuing a command. I'd like that. The reply came immediately. See you at 6. Isabella put her phone down and tried to ignore the flutter of anticipation in her stomach. This wasn't a date. This was just dinner with the father of her child. A chance to keep learning who he was beneath the armor. Nothing more. She spent the afternoon visiting her mother, who looked better than she had in years. The physical therapy Dr. Harrison had arranged was already showing results. Maria could grip with her left hand now, could speak more clearly. The improvement was subtle but undeniable. You look happy, Maria observed as they sat in the garden, or at least less terrified than the last time I saw you. I'm adjusting, Isabella admitted. It's still overwhelming, but it's getting easier. And Adrian, how is he treating you? Isabella thought about the churros, the note, the way he'd held her hand in his office at 2 a.m. He's trying. I think he's genuinely trying to be better. But I'm scared, Mama. I'm scared of trusting him and being wrong. I'm scared of falling for the man I met at that gala, only to discover he really was just a fantasy. Maria reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. Then take your time. Don't rush into anything. Keep your eyes open and your heart guarded until you're certain. And if I'm never certain? Then you'll still have your daughter, and she'll be enough. Isabella nodded, but she wasn't sure her mother was right. Their daughter would be enough for Isabella, she had no doubt about that. But what kind of life would it be, raising a child in the same space as a man she could never fully trust? Always guarded, always waiting for the other shoe to drop? She returned to the penthouse at 5:30, giving herself time to change before dinner. She chose a simple dress that accommodated her growing belly, left her hair down, applied minimal makeup. She told herself it wasn't because she wanted to look nice for Adrian. She told herself she was lying. At exactly 6 o'clock, she found Adrian in the dining room, already changed from his suit into dark slacks and a gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked relaxed, approachable, almost normal. "You look beautiful," he said as she entered. "You don't have to say that." "I know. I wanted to." Dinner was simpler than the elaborate meal from their first night: pasta with a light cream sauce, salad, fresh bread. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Adrian spoke. "I talked to my attorney today about the trust for our daughter." "Already?" "I move fast when something's important." He set down his fork. "But I realized I've been making all these decisions without consulting you. The trust, the hospital arrangements, even moving your mother without asking first." Isabella watched him carefully, waiting. "I'm used to being in control," Adrian continued. "Used to making decisions and having them followed without question. But you're not my employee, and our daughter isn't a business asset. So I'm asking, do you want to be involved in these decisions? Do you want a say in how we plan for her future?" The question surprised her. "Of course I do." "Then tomorrow we'll meet with the attorney together. You can ask whatever questions you want, make whatever stipulations you think are important. This is your daughter too. You should have equal say." It was such a small thing, offering to include her in planning. But for a man like Adrian Romano, who'd spent his entire adult life in absolute control, it was enormous. "Thank you," Isabella said quietly. "That means a lot." "I'm learning," Adrian said with a slight smile. "Slowly, but I'm learning." They talked through dinner about safer topics, books they'd both read, places they wanted to travel someday, childhood memories that shaped them. Isabella learned that Adrian had wanted to be an architect when he was young, that he'd spent summers on his grandfather's boat learning to sail, that he'd once had a dog named Winston who'd been his best friend for 12 years. Adrian learned that Isabella had been a dancer until she was 16, and an injury ended her dreams of performing, that she'd taught herself to cook by watching YouTube videos, that she secretly loved terrible reality TV shows even though she knew they rotted her brain. It was normal, easy. The kind of conversation they might have had if they'd met under different circumstances, in a different life. When dinner ended, Adrian walked her to the door of her suite, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain for the first time since she'd known his real name. "I enjoyed tonight," he said. "So did I." "Maybe we could do it again? Make it a regular thing?" Isabella hesitated, knowing that saying yes meant something, meant opening herself up to more than just co-parenting. "I'd like that," she said finally. Adrian's smile transformed his face, made him look young and hopeful and so much like the man from the diner that Isabella's breath caught. "Good night, Isabella." "Good night, Adrian." She closed the door between them and leaned against it, her heart racing. This was dangerous. This feeling blooming in her chest, this hope that maybe they could become something real, but maybe dangerous was okay. Maybe taking risks was how you built something worth having. The baby kicked hard, as if agreeing, and Isabella laughed softly, her hand pressed to her stomach. "Your father is complicated," she whispered, "but I think maybe we're going to figure this out." 3 days later, everything changed. Isabella was reading in the library when she heard raised voices from Adrian's office. Not unusual, he often had tense meetings, but something about the tone made her pay attention. "You can't be serious." Adrian's voice was sharp, angry. "After everything, I don't have a choice." Another man's voice, older, strained. "Castellano knows about the girl, about the baby. He's threatened to go public if you don't back down on the waterfront deal." Isabella's blood went cold. "How did he find out?" Adrian demanded. "I don't know, but he has proof. Photos. He knows she's living here." Silence fell, heavy and terrible. "Get out," Adrian said finally, his voice deadly quiet. "I need to think." Isabella was still frozen in place when Adrian appeared in the library doorway. His face was pale, his jaw tight with fury barely held in check. "You heard," he said. "It wasn't a question. Someone knows about me, about the baby." "Yes." Adrian moved into the room, and she could see he was struggling to maintain control. "Castellano is a rival. He's been trying to take over my waterfront operations for months. Apparently he's decided to use you as leverage." "What does that mean?" "It means you're in danger. It means he'll threaten you to get to me." Isabella stood, her hand moving protectively to her stomach. "What are we going to do?" Adrian's eyes met hers, and what she saw there terrified her more than any threat. "I'm going to end this. Tonight. Before he has a chance to make good on his threats." "Adrian, what does that mean? End it how?" But she already knew. She could see it in the cold fury on his face, in the way his hands had curled into fists. "No," she said. "You can't. You said you were trying to be better." "Better doesn't protect you," Adrian cut her off. "Better doesn't keep our daughter safe. Castellano threatened my family. There's only one response to that. Violence. Blood. You're going to kill him." "Yes." The word fell like a stone. Isabella stared at the man she'd been learning to trust, learning to care for, and saw the crime lord he'd always been underneath, saw the violence he was capable of, the ruthlessness that everyone had warned her about. "Please don't," she whispered. "There has to be another way. You can negotiate, pay him off, give him what he wants. If I back down, I look weak. If I look weak, others will come for you. For her. This is the only way to send a message that you're untouchable." "By becoming the monster everyone says you are?" Adrian flinched as if she'd struck him. "I've always been that monster, Isabella. I just tried to hide it from you." "No, I don't believe that. The man who makes churros appear because I mentioned liking them, who learns lullabies for his daughter, who gives employees 48 hours to run. That's not a monster. That man is a luxury I can't afford right now." Adrian turned toward the door, and Isabella realized he was actually going to do this, was going to walk out of this penthouse and commit murder to protect her. "If you do this," she said, her voice breaking, "if you kill him, I can't stay here. I can't raise our daughter in a home built on violence." He stopped, his back rigid. "You'd leave?" "I'd have to. I can't look at you every day knowing you chose murder over finding another way. Yet even if it keeps you safe, safety at that cost isn't worth it." Adrian stood frozen for a long moment. When he finally turned back, his expression was anguished. "He threatened you, Isabella. He threatened our child. What am I supposed to do? Just let that go? Find another way, please, for her, for the man you're trying to become." The silence stretched between them, weighted with impossible choices. Adrian stood motionless in the library doorway, torn between the violence that had defined his entire life and the woman asking him to choose something different. Isabella could see the war playing out across his face, fury and fear, and something that looked almost like desperation. "You don't understand what you're asking," he said finally, his voice raw. "In my world, showing mercy is the same as showing weakness. If I don't respond to this threat with overwhelming force, every enemy I have will think they can come for you, for her. Then maybe it's time to change what your world looks like. I can't just snap my fingers and make 30 years of bloodshed disappear, Isabella. The Romano name is built on fear. Without that fear, I have nothing. You have me." The words came out before she could stop them, before she could think about what they meant. "You have our daughter. Isn't that something?" Adrian's expression cracked, revealing the anguish beneath his control. "It's everything, which is why I can't let anything happen to either of you." "Then find another way," Isabella pleaded. "You're smart. You're powerful. Use that power for something other than violence." "Like what?" Isabella crossed the room until she stood directly in front of him, close enough to see the gray of his eyes had gone almost silver with emotion. "You said Castellano wants the waterfront operations. Give them to him. You want me to just surrender territory? I want you to trade it. Give him what he wants in exchange for a guarantee that he stays away from me and the baby. Make it a business deal instead of a war." Adrian shook his head. "He won't honor it. Men like Castellano don't keep their word. Then make sure he has more to lose by breaking it than keeping it. You're Adrian Romano. You control half this city through fear, but you could control it through leverage instead. Something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Consideration, maybe, or the beginning of a plan. You're asking me to completely change how I operate, he said. I'm asking you to evolve. To be smarter than your enemies, instead of just more violent. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed what she was suggesting. Finally, he pulled his phone from his pocket and made a call. Marcus. Cancel the team. We're not moving on Castellano tonight. He paused, listening. Because I have a different plan. Get me everything we have on his operations. Debts, suppliers, weaknesses. I want it in an hour. He ended the call and looked at Isabella. This is either brilliant or the biggest mistake I've ever made. What are you going to do? What you suggested. Find leverage. Make it more valuable for him to leave you alone than to come after you. Adrian's hand lifted, hesitating just inches from her face. But, Isabella, if this doesn't work, if he tries anything, I will end him. That's not a threat or a warning, it's a promise. She understood what he was telling her, that he was trying, would try, but that ultimately he would do whatever it took to protect them, that the monster was still there, just leashed for now. I know, she said quietly. Adrian's hand finally made contact, his palm cupping her cheek with unexpected gentleness. You're asking me to be someone I've never been, someone I'm not sure I know how to be. Then we'll figure it out together. The words from their first dinner together, coming back now when they needed them most. Adrian's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and Isabella felt her breath catch. They were standing too close, the air between them charged with something that went beyond fear or strategy. His eyes dropped to her lips, and for one impossible moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, breaking the contact. I should get to work. If I'm going to find enough leverage to make Castellano back down, I need to move fast. Isabella nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment flooding through her. I'll be in my room if you need me. Isabella. Adrian's voice stopped her at the door. Thank you for believing I could be better, even when I don't believe it myself. She looked back at him, at this complicated man who was trying so hard to change the pattern of his entire life. You're welcome. Now go prove me right. Isabella returned to her suite, but she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city lights, and thinking about everything that had changed in the past week. A week ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was at the center of a power struggle that could get her killed. A week ago, Adrian Romano had been the monster everyone warned her about. Now he was in his office, trying to find a way to protect her without resorting to murder. The baby moved restlessly, responding to Isabella's anxiety. She rubbed her stomach in slow circles, trying to calm both of them. Your father is trying, she whispered. He's really trying. I just hope it's enough. Hours passed. Isabella dozed fitfully in the chair, jerking awake every time she heard footsteps in the hall. At 2 a.m, her door opened and Adrian stepped inside, looking exhausted but grimly satisfied. Did I wake you? He asked. I couldn't sleep. Did you find something? Adrian moved into the room, and in the low light from the city, Isabella could see the tension in his shoulders had eased slightly. Castellano has been laundering money through a series of offshore accounts. Very carefully, very cleverly hidden. But my people are better at finding hidden money than his people are at hiding it. What does that mean? It means I have proof of financial crimes that could put him away for 20 years. It means I have the names of 3 federal agents he's bribing. It means I have enough evidence to destroy him without firing a single shot. Adrian sat on the edge of her bed, and Isabella could see how tired he was, how much this had cost him. I called him an hour ago, told him what I had, gave him a choice. Back off completely, leave you and the baby alone, and I keep the evidence locked away. Or try anything, and I hand it all over to the FBI and watch his empire crumble. What did he say? He agreed, immediately. Turns out he's more afraid of federal prison than he is of me. Relief washed through Isabella so intensely she felt dizzy. So it's over? We're safe? For now, I'll keep digging, make sure I have enough leverage to keep him in line permanently. But yes, The immediate threat is handled. Isabella stood and crossed to where he sat, her hands finding his shoulders. She could feel the tension still coiled in his muscles, the toll this night had taken. "You did it," she said softly. "You found another way. Because you asked me to." Adrian looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw exhaustion and relief and something deeper that made her heart stutter. "I've spent 15 years solving problems with violence. Tonight was the first time I chose something different. How does it feel?" Adrian considered the question seriously. "Terrifying. Every instinct I have says I should have just eliminated the threat permanently, that leaving him alive is a mistake I'll regret. But you looked at me like I was someone worth believing in, and I didn't want to prove you wrong." Isabella's hand slid from his shoulders to frame his face, making him look at her directly. "You're not doing this just for me. You're doing it for yourself, for the man you want to become, for our daughter who deserves a father she doesn't have to be afraid of." Adrian's hands came up to circle her wrists, his thumbs finding her pulse points. "I don't know if I can sustain this," he admitted. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep choosing mercy when everything in my training says to choose violence. Then lean on me when you're not strong enough. Let me remind you who you're trying to be." The moment stretched between them, intimate and raw. Adrian's eyes searched hers, looking for something, reassurance, maybe, or permission. "Isabella," he said, her name a question and a plea. She knew what he was asking, knew that if she stayed here, this close, with her hands on his face and his on her wrists, something would shift between them that couldn't be taken back. She should step away, should maintain the boundaries that kept her safe. Instead, she leaned down and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing the waters. But then Adrian made a sound low in his throat and stood, his arms coming around her, pulling her as close as her pregnant belly would allow. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and desperate, months of tension and denial finally breaking through. Isabella's hands tangled in his hair, her body responding to his touch in ways she'd forgotten were possible. Adrian kissed like a man starving, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, like this moment was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "That was either the best idea or the worst idea we've ever had," he said, his voice rough. "Probably both," Isabella admitted. "I don't want to take advantage of you. You're living in my home, carrying my child, vulnerable in ways I can protect you from. This power imbalance is real," Isabella finished, "but so is this. Whatever this is between us." Adrian's hand found her stomach, settling gently over the place where their daughter grew. "I don't want to rush you into anything. I don't want you to feel obligated because of the baby, or because I have money or power, or—" Isabella kissed him again, stopping the spiral of words. "I'm here because I choose to be," she said when they parted. "Not because I'm trapped or obligated. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Choosing to see if the man from the diner and the man you're becoming can be the same person. And if they can't be, then we'll figure that out too. But Adrian, I need you to hear this. I'm not some fragile thing that's going to break. I'm not making decisions out of fear or desperation. I'm making them because for the first time in months, I'm not afraid of what comes next." Adrian studied her face like he was trying to memorize it, trying to understand how this woman who'd been invisible in his home had become the most important person in his world. "Stay with me tonight," he said quietly. "Not for anything more. Just stay. I don't want to be alone after everything that happened." Isabella knew it was a risk, knew that sleeping in his bed, even innocently, crossed lines they probably shouldn't cross. But she also knew that Adrian was being vulnerable in a way that probably terrified him, and she couldn't bring herself to turn away. "Okay," she whispered. They settled into his bed, still fully clothed, maintaining a careful distance at first. But gradually, as exhaustion claimed them both, Isabella found herself curled against Adrian's side, his arm around her shoulders, her hand resting over his heart. It felt right, safe, like maybe this complicated, dangerous, impossible situation could actually become something real. The next morning, Isabella woke to find Adrian already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "How long have you been staring at me?" she asked, her voice sleep rough. Not long. You were talking in your sleep. What was I saying? Something about churros and lullabies. Adrian's smile was soft, genuine. It was adorable. Isabella groaned and buried her face against his shoulder. That's mortifying. It's human. You're allowed to be human, Isabella. She lifted her head to look at him. So are you. I'm working on it. They lay there for a few more minutes, both of them aware that once they got up, once they left this quiet bubble, reality would intrude. Decisions would need to be made. Boundaries would need to be established. But for now, they just breathed together, and it was enough. Over the following weeks, Isabella and Adrian settled into a new rhythm. They had dinner together most nights, talking about everything from books to politics to what they hoped for their daughter's future. Adrian involved her in every major decision, about the trust fund, about security arrangements, about the nursery that was being designed in the suite next to hers. He didn't make another move physically, respecting the unspoken agreement that they needed to build something solid before they tested it further. But the attraction simmered between them, undeniable and growing stronger. Isabella's belly grew rounder, more pronounced. At 28 weeks, she could no longer hide the pregnancy, could no longer pretend it wasn't racing toward an inevitable conclusion. Adrian attended every doctor's appointment, asked intelligent questions, took notes like he was studying for the most important exam of his life. Dr. Chen pulled Isabella aside after one appointment. I've been practicing obstetrics for 30 years, she said quietly. I've seen hundreds of fathers-to-be. Most of them show up because they're supposed to. They check their phones, they look uncomfortable, they can't wait to leave. She glanced toward the waiting room where Adrian sat reading a book on infant development. That man in there? He's one of maybe 5 I've ever seen who's genuinely invested, who cares as much about your well-being as the baby's. Whatever complicated history you two have, he's trying to be there for you. That's worth something. Isabella knew it was worth something. She was just terrified of how much. The night she hit 30 weeks, Isabella woke to cramping that made her gasp. It wasn't labor, too early, wrong kind of pain, but it was intense enough to scare her. She reached for her phone to call Dr. Chen, but her hands were shaking too badly to dial. Instead, she pressed the intercom button that connected to Adrian's room. He answered on the first ring, instantly alert. Isabella? What's wrong? I don't know, cramping, it hurts. I'm coming. He was there in seconds, still in sleep pants and a t-shirt, his hair disheveled. But his hands were steady as he helped her sit up, as he called Dr. Chen and described Isabella's symptoms with calm precision. She wants us to come in, Adrian said after hanging up. Just to be safe. Can you walk? I think so. He helped her dress, his touch clinical and careful, never taking advantage even though she was vulnerable. The drive to the hospital felt endless, every bump in the road sending fresh waves of pain through Isabella's abdomen. Adrian held her hand the entire time, his thumb tracing patterns on her skin, his voice low and soothing as he talked about nothing in particular, just filling the silence with words so she wouldn't spiral into panic. At the hospital, they were ushered immediately to a private room. Dr. Chen examined Isabella thoroughly while Adrian paced outside, and Isabella realized with a jolt that she wanted him there. Wanted his steady presence, his calm in the middle of her fear. You can come back in, Dr. Chen called, and Adrian was through the door before the words finished leaving her mouth. Braxton Hicks contractions, the doctor explained. Practice contractions. Completely normal at this stage, though they can be uncomfortable. The baby's fine? Isabella's fine. Just her body preparing for the real thing. The relief on Adrian's face was almost comical. He sank into the chair beside Isabella's bed like his legs had given out. So we're okay? He asked. You're both perfectly okay, but I want Isabella on modified bed rest for the next few days, just to be cautious. No stress. Plenty of fluids. Feed up whenever possible. After Dr. Chen left, Adrian helped Isabella back to the car. They drove home in silence, the adrenaline of the scare slowly fading. You were terrified, Isabella said quietly. Of course I was terrified. I can face down armed men without blinking, but the thought of something happening to you or her? He broke off, his jaw tight. That's a fear I don't know how to control. You don't have to control it. You just have to feel it. Back at the penthouse, Adrian insisted on carrying her to her room despite her protests that she could walk perfectly fine. He settled her into bed with more pillows than any person could possibly need and brought her water, juice, and crackers she hadn't asked for. I'm not an invalid, Isabella said, but she was smiling. I know. Humor me anyway. He sat on the edge of her bed, his hand finding hers. When I got your call tonight, he said quietly, when I heard the fear in your voice, I understood something. You, the baby, this life we're trying to build, it's the only thing I've ever had that I'm genuinely afraid of losing. Adrian, let me finish. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. I've built an empire on fear and control. I've survived things that should have killed me. I've never been afraid of death or pain or loss because I never had anything worth protecting. His eyes met hers, and she saw everything he wasn't saying written clearly in their depths. But now I do. Now I have you and her, and the possibility of a future that looks nothing like my past. And the thought of losing that, of failing to protect it, that terrifies me more than anything I've ever faced. Isabella's free hand came up to cup his face, her heart so full it ached. You're not going to lose us. We're here. We're safe. You made that happen. By choosing your way instead of mine, by listening when every instinct told me to act. And I'm so proud of you for that. Do you understand? I'm proud of who you're becoming. Adrian leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. When he opened them again, there was a vulnerability there that made Isabella's breath catch. I'm falling in love with you, he said, the words barely above a whisper. I know I shouldn't. I know it's too fast, too complicated. But I need you to know that this isn't just about the baby anymore. It's about you, about who you are and how you see me and the way you make me want to be better. Isabella felt tears slide down her cheeks. I'm falling in love with you too. And it terrifies me because I know how badly this could go wrong. But Adrian, I think it's worth the risk. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers. Get some rest. I'll be right here if you need anything. Stay, Isabella said, like before. I don't want to be alone. Adrian kicked off his shoes and stretched out beside her on top of the covers, careful not to jostle her. Isabella curled into his side, her hand over his heart, feeling the steady rhythm that matched her own. Tell me about the future, she said quietly. The one you want, not the one you think you're supposed to have. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking through her hair. I want to wake up next to you every morning and know that you chose to stay. I want to watch our daughter grow up strong and fearless and kind. I want to teach her to sail and help her with her homework and embarrass her when she brings boys home. Isabella smiled against his chest. I want to take you to the places I've only ever visited for business and actually see them through your eyes. I want to dance with you at our daughter's wedding someday. I want to grow old knowing that I managed to become someone worthy of you. You already are, Isabella whispered. Not yet, but I'm trying. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, two people learning to trust each other with futures neither had planned for, but both desperately wanted. When Isabella woke hours later, Adrian was still there, still holding her, still choosing to stay even when he didn't have to. And for the first time since learning his real name, Isabella let herself believe that maybe they really could build something lasting from the ruins of their complicated beginning. That maybe love could grow in the spaces between fear and trust, between the man he'd been and the man he was becoming. That maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. The weeks that followed moved with the strange compression of time that comes at the end of a pregnancy. Days blurred together in a rhythm of doctor's appointments, nursery preparations, and quiet evenings where Isabella and Adrian built something neither of them had quite named yet, though they both knew what it was becoming. At 34 weeks, Isabella could no longer see her own feet. She waddled more than walked, her back aching constantly despite the prenatal massages Adrian had arranged. She'd stopped working entirely at Dr. Chen's insistence, spending her days reading baby books and trying not to panic about the rapidly approaching due date. Adrian had changed in ways Isabella was still cataloging. He came home earlier now, delegating more to his lieutenants, trusting others in ways he'd told her he never had before. He'd started attending a regular meeting with his attorney about transitioning more of his operations into legitimate businesses. It was slow work, complicated by decades of criminal enterprise, but he was trying. More than that, he was present. He assembled the crib himself, cursing softly in Italian when the instructions didn't make sense. He painted the nursery a soft yellow that Isabella had chosen, getting more paint in his hair than on the walls. He practiced changing diapers on a stuffed bear until Isabella laughed so hard she nearly went into labor early. He was building a life with her, brick by careful brick. But there were still moments when Isabella saw the other Adrian surface, when a business call went wrong and his voice dropped to that deadly calm tone, when he read reports that made his jaw tighten with barely suppressed fury, when he looked at her and their daughter with an intensity that bordered on possession. The monster was still there. It had just learned to coexist with the man. 2 weeks before her due date, Isabella woke at 3 a.m. to find the bed empty beside her. They'd been sleeping in Adrian's room for the past month, neither of them bothering to pretend anymore that they wanted to be apart. But now the sheets were cold, and Adrian was gone. She found him in the nursery, sitting in the rocking chair they'd chosen together, staring at the empty crib with an expression of such profound fear that it stopped her in the doorway. "Adrian?" she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up, and she saw that his face was wet with tears. "I can't stop thinking about Catherine," he admitted, his voice raw. "About how I failed her, how I wasn't there when she needed me. What if I fail again? What if I make the same mistakes?" Isabella crossed the room and knelt beside the chair, taking his hands in hers despite the awkwardness of her belly. "You won't fail. You're not that person anymore." "How can you be so sure?" "Because that man wouldn't be sitting here at 3 a.m. terrified of repeating his mistakes. That man wouldn't have spent the last 8 weeks learning lullabies in Spanish. That man wouldn't have chosen mercy over violence when everything in his training said to choose blood." She squeezed his hands. "You're different now, Adrian. Not perfect, not completely transformed, but different in the ways that matter. What if different isn't enough? What if our daughter needs more than I can give her? Then we'll figure it out together. You keep saying that word like it's a safety net, but Adrian, it's more than that. It's a promise. We're in this together. The fear, the mistakes, the victories, all of it." Adrian pulled her up and into his lap as much as her pregnant belly would allow, burying his face in her hair. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too. Even the parts of you that scare me, even the parts you wish didn't exist." They stayed like that until the sky started to lighten, holding each other in the room that would soon hold their daughter, both of them trying to believe they could actually do this. At 37 weeks, Isabella's water broke during dinner. One moment she was laughing at Adrian's terrible attempt to tell a joke in Spanish. The next she was sitting in a puddle, her eyes going wide with shock and realization. "That's not supposed to happen for 2 more weeks, she said, as if her body cared about timelines. Adrian was already moving, his training kicking in, that calm control settling over him like armor. But Isabella could see his hands shaking as he helped her stand, could hear the tremor in his voice when he called Dr. Chen. "It's going to be okay," he told her, and she wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. The drive to Mercy General was a blur of contractions and breathing exercises, and Adrian's steady voice talking her through each wave of pain. The private suite he'd arranged was beautiful, more like a luxury hotel room than a hospital, but Isabella barely registered it. The pain was worse than she'd imagined. Hours blurred together in a haze of contractions and ice chips and nurses with kind faces telling her she was doing great when she felt like she was dying. Adrian never left. He held her hand through every contraction, breathed with her, let her squeeze his fingers until she thought she might break bones. When she screamed that she hated him for doing this to her, he just smiled and said he loved her too. 16 hours after her water broke, Dr. Chen finally said the words Isabella had been desperately waiting for. "It's time to push." The next 30 minutes were the hardest of Isabella's life. Every muscle screaming, every nerve on fire, her entire world narrowed to the single goal of bringing her daughter into the world. Adrian's voice was her anchor, steady and sure, reminding her she was strong enough, brave enough, powerful enough. And then, at 6:47 in the morning, Elena Rose Romano came into the world screaming. Isabella heard Adrian make a sound that was half sob, half laugh as Dr. Chen placed their daughter on her chest. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of pure perfection, with dark hair and her father's gray eyes and lungs that could wake the dead. "She's beautiful," Adrian whispered, his voice breaking. She's so beautiful. Isabella looked down at the tiny, angry face of her daughter and felt love so intense it was almost painful. This was what she'd been fighting for. This was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." The nurses took Elena to clean her up and run the necessary tests while Dr. Chen finished with Isabella. When they brought her back, swaddled and calm now, they placed her in Adrian's arms. Isabella watched as Adrian Romano, the man feared by an entire city, the crime lord who'd built an empire on violence, wept openly while holding his daughter for the first time. His hands were gentle, reverent, cradling Elena like she was made of glass and starlight. "Hello, Principessa," he murmured in Italian. "I'm your papa, and I promise you I will spend the rest of my life earning the right to hold you like this." Elena yawned, completely unimpressed by her father's reputation, and grabbed his finger in her tiny fist. Adrian looked at Isabella with wonder written across his face. "We made this," he said. "We made her." "Yeah," Isabella said, exhausted and exhilarated and more in love than she'd thought possible. "We did." The first week home was chaos. Elena was a terrible sleeper, waking every 2 hours to feed, her cries piercing enough to wake the entire floor of the penthouse. Isabella was exhausted beyond measure, her body still recovering, her emotions swinging wildly between euphoria and tears. But Adrian was there for all of it. He changed diapers at 3 in the morning without complaint. He walked the floors with Elena when she wouldn't settle, singing Spanish lullabies in his terrible accent until both Isabella and the baby fell asleep. He brought Isabella water and snacks, made sure she took her medications, held her when the hormones made her cry for no reason. He was a partner in every sense of the word. Isabella's mother came to visit on day 5, making the trip with the help of a medical transport Adrian had arranged. Maria took one look at her granddaughter and dissolved into tears. "She's perfect," she said, holding Elena with her good arm while Adrian hovered protectively nearby. "Absolutely perfect. Just like her mother," Adrian said, and the look he gave Isabella made her heart skip. Over the following weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. Night feedings became a shared responsibility, both of them stumbling into the nursery when Elena cried. Adrian discovered he could soothe her by reading financial reports out loud in a monotone voice that apparently passed for a lullaby. Isabella learned that she could nap anywhere as long as Elena was safe. They became a family. But Isabella knew there were still conversations they needed to have. Decisions that had been postponed by pregnancy and birth but couldn't be avoided forever. 6 weeks after Elena was born, Isabella found Adrian in his office late at night, staring at papers spread across his desk. She recognized them immediately. Contracts, agreements, the kind of documents that controlled his criminal enterprises. "What are you doing?" she asked from the doorway. Adrian looked up, exhaustion clear on his face. "Making decisions. Hard ones." Isabella crossed to the desk, Elena sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Talk to me." Adrian gestured to the papers. "I've been thinking about what you said, about changing what the Romano name means, about being someone Elena doesn't have to be afraid of." He picked up a contract, studied it, then set it down. "I can't walk away from everything overnight. There are too many people depending on me, too many obligations, but I can start moving things in a different direction. Shift more operations to legitimate businesses. Distance myself from the violence." "That's a good start," Isabella said carefully. "But it's not enough, is it?" Adrian looked at her directly. "You're still waiting for the other shoe to drop, still watching to see if I'll go back to being the monster." "I'm watching to see if you can sustain this," Isabella corrected. "If the man you're trying to be is strong enough to withstand the pressure of your world." Adrian stood and moved around the desk to stand before her and their daughter. "I've spent the last 6 weeks watching you be the strongest person I've ever known, watching you bring our daughter into the world, recover from birth, adapt to motherhood like you were made for it. You've been extraordinary, Isabella, and it's made me realize something." He reached out, his hand gentle on Elena's head. "I don't want to be strong enough to withstand my world. I want to be strong enough to change it, for her, for you, for the future we could have if I'm brave enough to choose it." "What does that mean?" Adrian took a deep breath. "It means I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. I'm going to systematically dismantle the criminal operations and transition everything I can to legitimate business. It'll take time, maybe years, and it'll be dangerous because there will be people who don't want things to change. Adrian, I know the risks, but I also know that I can't be the father Elena deserves if I'm still the man I was. So I'm choosing to be someone different, someone better. Isabella felt tears slide down her cheeks. That's going to cost you power, respect, maybe your entire empire. I know. But I'll gain something more valuable. He cupped her face with his free hand. I'll gain the right to look my daughter in the eyes when she's old enough to ask what her father does for a living and not have to lie. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything except loving you. Isabella shifted Elena carefully and wrapped her free arm around Adrian's waist, pressing close despite the baby between them. Then I'm with you. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Together? Adrian agreed and kissed her with the tenderness of a man who'd found something worth protecting more than his empire. The transformation wasn't easy or quick. Over the following months, Adrian systematically began divesting himself of criminal operations, selling territory, paying off debts, cutting ties with associates who wouldn't follow him toward legitimacy. It cost him exactly what he'd predicted: power, respect, the fear that had kept him safe for so long. But it gained him something more valuable. It gained him a life. Isabella watched as Adrian became someone she could trust completely. Someone who came home for dinner every night. Someone who attended board meetings instead of sitting down with mob bosses. Someone who held their daughter and read her bedtime stories about princesses and adventures rather than balance sheets and territory disputes. There were setbacks, moments when the old Adrian surfaced, when threats emerged and his first instinct was violence. But each time, Isabella reminded him who he was trying to become, and each time, he chose differently. On Elena's first birthday, they threw a party in the penthouse. Maria was there, walking with a cane now, her speech almost completely recovered thanks to the therapy Adrian had arranged. Dr. Chen came, along with Rosa, the chef, and several other staff members who'd become something like family. Isabella stood by the window, watching Adrian with Elena on his shoulders, the baby giggling as he pretended to be a horse. He looked happy, genuinely, completely happy in a way she'd never seen during those early days. "You've been good for him," Maria said, appearing at her daughter's side. "I wasn't sure at first. Wasn't sure a man like that could really change. But you've given him a reason to be better." "He gave himself the reason," Isabella corrected. "I just reminded him it was possible." "That's what love does. It makes the impossible seem achievable." Isabella looked at her mother. "You approve, then? Of us?" "I approve of who he's becoming. I approve of how he looks at you and my granddaughter like you're the only things that matter in the world. I approve of the fact that he's trying, every single day, to be worthy of you." Maria squeezed her daughter's hand. "But most of all, I approve because you're happy. Really, genuinely happy. And that's all I ever wanted for you." That evening, after the guests had left and Elena was asleep in her crib, Isabella and Adrian sat on the balcony overlooking the city. It was a warm summer night, the kind that made you believe anything was possible. "I have something for you," Adrian said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box, and Isabella's heart stuttered. "Before you panic," he said with a slight smile, "this isn't a demand or an assumption. It's a question, one I'm hoping you'll consider." He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, simple, elegant, perfect. "I know we've done everything backwards. Met at a gala, spent one night together, created Elena before we really knew each other, lived together, fell in love, built a family all in the wrong order." Adrian took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her skin. "But, Isabella, I don't want to spend another day without making this official. Without telling the whole world that you're mine and I'm yours, and we chose each other despite everything that should have kept us apart." He looked at her with such vulnerability, such hope, that Isabella could barely breathe. "Marry me. Not because of Elena. Not because it's expected or appropriate, but because I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. Because you made me want to be better. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it." Isabella felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes? Yes, Adrian, yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands, and then he was kissing her, deep and desperate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. "I never thought I'd have this," Adrian whispered against her hair. "After Catherine, after losing everything, I never thought I'd get another chance at happiness." "You didn't just get another chance," Isabella said. "You earned it, by choosing to be better, by choosing us over everything else." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding each other as the city lights sparkled below them. "What do you think the future looks like?" Adrian asked eventually. Isabella considered the question. "I think we'll have good days and hard days. I think you'll still struggle sometimes with who you used to be. I think Elena will grow up strong and fierce and probably give us more gray hairs than we can count." She turned in his arms to look at him directly. "But I think we'll figure it out together. I think we'll build something lasting from this impossible beginning. And I think 20 years from now, we'll look back and realize that the best decision either of us ever made was choosing to trust each other." "That sounds perfect," Adrian said. They married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the penthouse with only their closest friends and family present. Maria cried through the entire thing. Elena babbled cheerfully in her grandmother's arms, completely unaware of the significance. And when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Adrian kissed Isabella like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth, because in many ways she was. In the years that followed, Adrian Romano became someone new. Not Adrian Rossi. That fantasy man had never really existed, but a synthesis of both. A man who understood his past, but wasn't imprisoned by it. He transitioned the last of his criminal operations into legitimate businesses, established a foundation to help at-risk youth, and became known as a philanthropist rather than a crime lord. It wasn't a complete transformation. There were still moments when his reputation preceded him, when people looked at him with fear or suspicion. But more often now, they looked at him with respect, with trust. Elena grew up healthy and loved, surrounded by both her parents and her grandmother, who lived with them until she passed peacefully in her sleep when Elena was 7. She never knew the darker side of her father's past, only that he worked hard, loved fiercely, and taught her that people could change if they wanted to badly enough. When Elena was 10, she asked her father how he and her mother had met. Adrian looked at Isabella across the dinner table, a smile playing at his lips. "At a party," he said. "Your mother was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and I was lucky enough that she gave me a chance when she probably shouldn't have." "Why shouldn't she have?" Elena asked. "Because I wasn't a very good person back then. But your mother saw something in me worth saving, and she made me want to be better." Elena considered this seriously. "So you changed for Mom." "For your mom. For you. For myself." Adrian reached across the table to take Isabella's hand. "The people we love give us reasons to become who we're meant to be. Your mother gave me that reason." Years later, when Elena was grown and starting her own life, Isabella and Adrian would sit on that same balcony where he'd proposed, watching the city lights and marveling at everything they'd built together. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked one night. "Giving me that chance? Choosing this complicated life?" Isabella looked at the man beside her. Older now, gray threading through his dark hair, laugh lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when they'd first met. But still her Adrian. Still the man who'd learned to choose mercy over violence, love over fear. "Never," she said. "Not for a single moment. Even when it was hard? Especially when it was hard. That's when it mattered most." Adrian pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something lasting from the ruins of their complicated beginning. Isabella thought about the scared, invisible woman she'd been that day she stumbled in his office, about the crime lord who'd noticed her for the first time, about the impossible journey from there to here, about how sometimes the best love stories start in the most unexpected places with the most unlikely people, when you're brave enough to see who someone could become rather than just who they are. About how choosing to stay, choosing to trust, choosing to believe in possibility, those choices could change everything. In a world built on power and fear, Isabella Cruz and Adrian Romano had discovered something more valuable than any empire. They discovered that love could transform even the hardest hearts, that family could be built from broken pieces, that second chances, when earned and cherished, could become something beautiful. And that sometimes, just sometimes, the choice between staying and leaving, between fear and trust, between the safe path and the risky one, that choice could lead you exactly where you were always meant to be, together.